What's up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. Before I dive into today's case, which is probably one of the most highly requested cases on my channel since I've started, I need to say a huge thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. I talk about NordVPN all of the time, you guys. Me and my safety, internet safety is right up there with everything else that I talk about. If you're not aware of what NordVPN is, it is an award-winning virtual private network that helps to protect you and your identity and anything important to you while you are browsing online. It can protect things like your passwords that you have saved on your laptop or your phone or your iPad. It helps protect any credit card information that you may have, social security number, anything that you have stored, any type of personal data on any of your devices is protected through NordVPN. Because there is a Chrome browser extension, it makes using NordVPN incredibly easy. It's very user-friendly, which is probably one of my favorite things. When I first heard the word VPN, I was like, what the heck does that mean? And how do I use that? Is this complicated? But it's not at all. It just takes a few clicks and you can secure your browsing from any device that you're using, whether you're at home and using your laptop or you're using public Wi-Fi while out and about, you're traveling maybe, NordVPN is going to help protect all of your personal data. One other really cool thing that I think you guys particularly might enjoy right now is the fact that it also helps you unlock different streaming services from different countries. So if there's something that you want to watch on Netflix or some sort of documentary streaming service and you can't get it in your country, NordVPN helps you do that. Right now, NordVPN is offering my subscribers 70% off, making their services only $3.49 a month, which is absolutely nothing compared to the safety of all of your personal information. And on top of that, they're going to give you an additional month for free if you go to nordvpn.com/Danielle and use code Danielle at checkout. Thank you again to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video and helping to keep all of us safe, especially while we're very, very active on the internet right now. And now on to today's case. As you can clearly see by the title, I am covering the disappearance of Madison Scott. She was referred to as Maddy for most people that I saw while researching this case. That's what I will be calling her for the rest of this video. You guys have requested that I cover this case for a very, very long time, like very long time. I've seen her face so many times over the past, almost 3 years that I've had this channel going, and I'm finally around to doing it. And I felt like now is the perfect time because we're actually getting really close to the anniversary of her disappearance, which was May 28th, technically 27th into the 28th of 2011. Typically around the anniversary of disappearances, it's a very, very difficult time for the family, so I kind of hesitate creating videos around this time, but in particular with Maddy, the largest thing that they did to increase awareness on the case around the disappearance was this thing called a poker ride, where everyone could come out to the area where she went missing and they could ride horses, quads, they could walk, and it basically restarted searches while they were out there, and it kept her name alive. And unfortunately, because of COVID-19, they had to cancel that this year, and it would have been, I think, the 9th year that they've done it, and that is absolutely devastating. I can't imagine really looking forward to doing that once a year, to have that peace of mind and see that, you know, these many people are out here still thinking about my daughter or my sister or, you know, my friend, and to not have that this year after so many years of having that, I can imagine is devastating. So Maddy disappeared when she was 20 years old from Hogsback Lake in British Columbia, Canada, on May 28th, 2011. Maddy is something else, you guys, and I have this like odd personal connection with her, I feel like, because she reminds me so much of myself. Like, I look back to how I was at the age when she disappeared, and me and her probably would have been absolute best friends. She basically was the kind of person that nobody ever had anything bad to say about. She grew up with her parents, Dawn and Eldon, with an older brother and a little sister that she was very, very close to in Vanderhoof, British Columbia. She was the middle child, so she was the firecracker, the wild card. Like, you couldn't stop her, you couldn't slow her down. There was never a time that she was doing nothing. You could either find her participating in some kind of water sport, or she was on quads, or she was, you know, on her dirt bike, she was horseback riding, she was hanging out with her friends. She was just the kind of person that was constantly looking for something to do and something better to do, which unfortunately did lead to one quality that kind of was one of her quirks. She tended to ditch plans because she was always on the hunt for something more fun. But even when she did that, she would still invite everybody along with her. She was always the life of the party and drew everyone into her at high school just because she was kind. She was nice to everyone, and she just was this giant ball of energy. She was known to always keep a smile on everyone's face constantly, and she always had her friends back. So she was just the perfect definition of a social butterfly. Throughout high school, she would make short films with her friends, and she did this to stay busy and because it was fun. And she wanted to be full on, hands on deck. She wanted to, create the idea for these little films, and she wanted to execute them. She wanted to edit them herself. She wanted to turn it in. She took a class, a visual arts class, and she just had this love for it. And she loved it even more because she couldn't wait to show everybody what she had created. She was just something else. She had a knack for making people laugh and bringing people together, and that's why everybody loved her. There's a documentary that was made, an independent documentary, in I believe 2015, and it really gives you a good look into what people thought of her, because there were more people on that documentary speaking good about her than I've seen probably in any documentary that I've looked into. I mean, just friend after friend showed up and just had nothing but great things to say. She graduated from high school in 2009 and then went on to work with her dad as an apprentice heavy-duty mechanic at a logging company. I'm telling you, there was nothing that this girl could not do. And she was happy. She was living life to the absolute fullest. She had nothing slowing her down. But something happened that to this day no one is sure of. And it's very unsettling in my opinion, because this is one of those cases where I feel like there's so many different ways to speculate, but I almost feel like what really did happen, I think no one's really looking that direction. And I'll kind of explain that when I get into my theories. But let's just get started on Friday, the 27th of May, 2011, the day before she disappeared. It was a day like any other day. She had lunch with her mom, and then she had plans originally that day to hang out with her cousin. Her cousin lived in Prince George, I think about 3-ish hours away. I could be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure that's how far it is. She was in town just for a few days, and they had been planning to hang out. But as Maddy would sometimes do, she ended up texting her cousin that day saying, I'm actually going to my friend's birthday party at Hogsback Lake. I'm sorry to have to cancel on you, but I'm just really looking forward to going. Now, again, this was typical for Maddy to do, so this wasn't crazy. I don't think anyone was overly upset or anything like that. It was just her typical last-minute change in plans. She was very, very spontaneous. Maddy planned to go to this party with an old high school friend named, I believe, Jordan, but everyone calls her Jordy. And Jordy had moved to the area in 2007, so halfway through Maddy's high school career, so halfway through Maddy's high school experience, and they became friends. I don't think they were ever incredibly close. I do know that by the time they graduated, according to Maddy's mom, they pretty much didn't really talk anymore, and that was the last time they had seen each other until this party. So it's kind of random that they decided to hook up together and go to this party. I don't know how exactly that happened. I don't know if they maybe just saw that the other had been invited and they're like, oh yeah, let's just go together. But either way, they decided for the first time in years to hang out and go to this party. Because they planned to drink at this party, Maddy and Jordy decided they were going to camp out, and apparently there were a couple other partygoers that planned to camp as well. There was a big Facebook page about this party. There was an event page, so they were kind of communicating on there. And so Maddy packed up toiletries, any personal belongings she needed. She packed a cooler that she filled with a 6-pack, a bottle of wine, and I think 2 tents. And Maddy and Jordy headed off in Maddy's 1990 Ford F-150. Hogsback Lake is about 20 minutes from Vanderhoof, just kind of depending on where they live. I'm not sure where that is, so I can't say directly, but it's a 20-minute to 30-minute one-way drive. When they got there, they started to set up the tent, and I'm assuming they got there probably sometime around 8. I don't know an exact time. They realized right away that one of the tents they had was teeny tiny. I believe they had the other larger tent with them, but they forgot the poles for the tent. So sometime around 9, they decided to head back to Maddy's house to grab the poles so they'd have a larger tent to sleep in. Maddy's mom remembers seeing her. She, did have some communication with Maddy when she came back. It was around 9:30, she said. Maddy seemed to be in a fine mood. She just said they goofed up, forgot the pole, so she was grabbing them and heading back out to the lake. So this would put her back at Hogsback Lake roughly at around 10 p.m. The last time Maddy's mom heard from her was 11:30 p.m. that night, so just an hour and a half later. They had been texting back and forth about a song, and Maddy claimed to be in her tent at this time, and she still seemed to be in a great mood. So her mom just told her, I love you, be safe, good night, I'll talk to you tomorrow. But unfortunately, that never happened because nobody has any idea what happened to Maddy that night into the early morning hours. Maddy's family figured she would be back the next day, but nobody heard from her, and she had plans for the entire weekend. Like I said, she was busy. She packed her schedule from start to finish, so they knew she'd likely be in and out to kind of go to these other plans throughout the weekend. Dawn, her mother, tried to contact her a couple of times, but by mid-morning on Saturday, her phone was going straight to voicemail. Dawn was not concerned about this at first because Hogsback Lake is kind of not out in the middle of nowhere. It's just kind of remote and there is not any service there whatsoever. So Dawn figured her phone just couldn't get any service and that's why she wasn't able to contact her. And Maddy was a very responsible young woman. If there was any problem, she would be able to contact her family. She would find a way to contact them and let them know. But then Sunday morning rolled around and still nobody had been in contact with Maddy. None of Maddy's friends, Maddy's mom couldn't get in contact with her dad couldn't get in contact with her, and her phone was still going to voicemail. Dawn decided to call Jordy's mom. Since the girls had left together, she figured, they're still together, and that will maybe give me some sort of idea if maybe something's wrong or if they're fine. Jordy's mom just may know more, but that's not exactly the answer that she got when she finally got Jordy's mom on the phone. Jordy had apparently been home since early Saturday morning. So where on earth was Maddy? It had been over 24 hours that Jordy had been home and Maddy had not shown up. Maddy's parents immediately drove out to Hogsback Lake and Maddy's campsite was still there. There, I think, were 4 campsites at Hogsback Lake. She was at the first main one. There was 2 others nearby, and then I think the 4th one was on the other side of the lake, technically on a private property. She was at the very first campsite. Now, her truck was parked there, right beside her tent, and the truck was locked, and all of Maddy's belongings appeared to be inside. It looked like her purse was in there, some of her clothes, in the very back of her truck, some very expensive motorbike gear that she had just purchased was back there still. The cooler was still back there, and it even had a few beers left in it, and she'd only brought a 6-pack, and the tent itself had been flattened with all of her sleeping bags and other belongings inside of it. Maddy was absolutely nowhere to be found, so they immediately called authorities and reported her as missing. While they waited for authorities to show up, which did not take long at all, Maddy's parents frantically went everywhere they could in the nearby area looking for her, any sign of Maddy, looking for other campers. Maddy's mom, Dawn, stopped every single car that was coming in and out of Hogsback Lake to ask them if they had seen anything or heard anything and how long they had been there. And they ended up finding campers at, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd campsite. And these campers ended up being some of Maddy's friends. When they spoke to these campers, they said that they had been there since Saturday afternoon, so they hadn't been there since Maddy had been there, but they said they remembered seeing Maddy's car and tent, but they had not seen Maddy since they got there. Now, while that could kind of be a big deal because that could indicate she hadn't been there that entire time, it was also kind of far enough away and just out of sight enough to where they could have easily missed her. Authorities showed up at around 12 p.m. that Sunday and told Maddy's family the first thing they wanted them to do was start calling her friends, call anyone they could. They knew there was a party that night, but they didn't know exactly who all was there. And it didn't take long, because I told you there was a Facebook event page, for them to create a list of exactly who had attended the party. There had been about 50 total individuals at the party that Friday night, and it was thrown by a young man named Garrett. This was a yearly party, so everyone was very familiar with this. It obviously was a big deal because it was a Facebook event, so I'm sure maybe some other people could see it. And it was mainly individuals from about 18 years old to 21 or 22, I believe. So this is a list of 50 people that authorities needed to question to see if they knew what exactly happened to Maddy, if anyone had stayed there with her that night. But then things got even more complicated. While compiling this list, they found out that Saturday night there was a party in the exact same location. This time with 150 people. Now this group was young teenagers, I think like 14, 15 to 17, maybe 18 years old, but that's 150 more people, creating 200 people total that had been at this campsite in 24 hours. And that creates a lot of problems. If anything had happened to Maddy, it would have been easy maybe for it to get lost in everything that was happening. If there had been a crime and no one knew about it, they could have trampled evidence at these parties. Anything that could have possibly helped them find Maddy may have been lost because of the amount of people that were out at this location. Authorities questioned every single person that was at the party Friday night and at the party Saturday night. Now, they weren't linked, I just want to make that clear. It was two separate parties, but she just so happened to have all of her belongings there for both of them. Now, according to the partygoers on Friday that went to the party that Maddy was actually planning to attend, they said that she spent most of her night inside of her tent, which is very alarming to me because she was so excited to go to this party. She brought beer, she brought wine, she was gonna camp out there, she planned on drinking, having a good time. She even canceled plans with her cousin that lived 3 hours away and would only be in town for a short period of time to go to this party. So why on earth was she in her tent this entire time? And when they started to question Jordy, who was with her that night and was supposed to camp with her that night, things kind of started to get strange. Jordy confirmed that they went to the site, but they realized that they needed the pole, so they went back to Maddy's house and then came back. Now, she's done a couple of interviews, Jordy has, and I have seen her within these interviews change her story a few times, and I've also heard that she changed her story to authorities a few different times as well. She said that when they got back, they set up the tent. She then states that all the girls at the party went out to get firewood, and then she says they came back and they set up the tent again. Now, I don't know if this was just nerves in her interview for the documentary. The documentary was made in 2015, and then there's a 48 Hours episode that was made in 2012. But she kind of repeated different circumstances, and she said that after they set the tent up for the second time, which is kind of odd, they decided to go ahead and start drinking, and people started showing up. Now, Maddy obviously was not drinking much at all because according to those at the party, she was sharing the one bottle of wine that she had with a few other people. There was not that many glasses within a bottle. If you're sharing it, you maybe are going to get one. And she also obviously didn't drink too many beers because there was a few left in the cooler. And Jordy herself ended up very highly intoxicated. And I don't know if she brought her own alcohol with her. I'm assuming maybe she was drinking some of Maddy's, but I don't know that for a fact. But either way, we at least know there's no way Maddy could have been very highly intoxicated. And witnesses at the party have said the exact same thing. Jordy then said that as most of them were drinking and having fun that night, at some point a rowdy crowd showed up that nobody knew. Now, most of this party was, again, 18-year-olds to 22-year-olds, but there's this random group of 40-year-olds that I've seen was there, and I kind of find that odd. I've only seen that on a few sources. I don't know if this is the rowdy crowd that came or if maybe the birthday boy Garrett just had a few older friends that showed up. I have absolutely no idea. But either way, some rowdy group showed up. And Jordy said this is when things started to change. But she's never elaborated on what exactly she meant by that. And when she describes this in interviews, her mood shifts. She just gets kind of funky. Jordy ended up shortly after this getting in some type of altercation, and she's changed her story about this a few times as well. According to her, she was thrown into the fire. That seems kind of extreme. She did not seek medical attention and she continued on to work the next day, so I doubt she was actually physically thrown into the bonfire. She's also stated that she just was simply thrown down near the fire. She's also stated that she was just thrown off of a log. But either way, her story revolves around her getting hurt, getting into some type of argument with someone, so she decided to leave with her boyfriend that, by the way, she had just started dating that night at around 1 in the morning. According to Jordy, she went into the tent where Maddy was, again, still very odd. She told Maddy that she was leaving because she had been thrown in the fire. However, in another interview, she told everyone that she told Maddy she was leaving because she was too drunk. So stories are changing, reasons for things are changing, and honestly, none of it quite makes a lot of sense, and she apparently made Maddy upset. Maddy did not want to be left there alone. She didn't understand why Jordy was leaving her, and Jordy offered her to come with them, but Maddy denied. She did not want to go. Jordy said that around the time that she left with her new boyfriend, Tyler, the campsite only had about 5 people at it, so the party had dwindled down a lot, which I also find interesting because it goes from a rowdy crowd shows up and she somehow gets in a fight with someone to all of a sudden there's nobody there out of 50 people. So I wonder if this altercation was maybe a bit more extreme than she let on, or if maybe authorities haven't released a lot, but that just kind of seems like an abrupt change, and most parties are not going to fizzle out at around 1 in the morning. Shortly after Jordy left, there was another problem. Garrett, the birthday boy, got into an argument with his girlfriend, so at about 2 a.m., he himself packed up his entire campsite, tent and all, and booked it back to town. And he, I think, was the only other person that was camping out this night, which A, means a whole bunch of drunk people drove home, which is not a great thing. And B, Maddy is now going to be left alone at a lake, at a campsite, all night long. When Garrett left, there were only a few other people still left at the party. Apparently, there was a group that had shown up that had late shifts that night, and they were sober when they got there. They just wanted to stop by. And they were concerned that Maddy had been left, that she had just been left alone. So they went again before they left around 2:30 to 3 in the morning to check on Maddy and ask if she wanted to be taken home. They said at this point she was pretty much asleep and denied the ride back into town, so they left her. This was the last time anyone saw Maddy. So there was nobody at this campsite that we know of with Maddy around 2:30 to 3 in the morning until Jordy came back to the campsite the following morning at 9. According to Jordy, again, she went back to the campsite because she was worried about Maddy. In Maddy's mother's opinion, as well as my own, that's a crock of BS. I do not believe she went back because she was worried about Maddy, and you will see why in a minute. So she showed back up with her boyfriend at around 9 in the morning before she had to go in for a work shift. And she said when she got there, Maddy's truck was still there, Maddy's tent was still there, but the tent door was wide open. When she went to take a closer look, Maddy was not inside of the tent, and she said everything in the tent appeared to be just like shoved to the sides of the tent and all moved around. Now, even though she said she went back to check on Maddy, Jordy grabbed her pillow, she grabbed her sleeping bag, and she left. She didn't check for Maddy. She did not call anyone to alert them that she couldn't find Maddy. She left. Now, honestly, bless Maddy's mother, because she has stated, maybe she was just in a rush to work. Maybe that's why she didn't call. She wasn't too worried. Maddy, after all, is an independent young woman. Like, she can take care of herself. But there is a 20-minute ride back into town, you guys. If you are going to go out of your way, 20-minute drive to a campsite to go check on someone like you claim, and they are not there, and you find the tent open and things in a very alarming state on the inside, and you're just going to go to work and not say anything, you're not going to take that 20-minute drive to call anyone, you understand my frustration. This was very alarming that she did not think to contact anyone. But either way, shortly after Jordy came, saw, and left, at around 10:30, Garrett himself also came back. Garrett, being the responsible individual he was since he had left his party in the middle of the night and left a mess, he decided to come back the following day to clean everything up. And when he got there, he said that Maddy's truck and tent were still there. But he states that the tent was completely zipped up and closed. So I don't know if Jordy zipped the tent up, or maybe Maddy was off doing something and she came back and zipped the tent up. I'm not sure if that question was ever asked to Jordy, but either way, the tent was closed up, and he probably figured she was sleeping and wasn't worried, so he didn't think to go over there and check on her either, and he left as well. The rest of this day passed, and this is around the time where Maddy's phone was going to voicemail, and then that night, Saturday night, this is when the second party occurred. Now, ironically enough, Maddy's sister was at this party, you guys. She saw Maddy's truck, she saw Maddy's tent. I don't know. I know she's 15. I don't know if she was worried. I don't know if she maybe thought that Maddy just didn't want to be around the age group of the party that was happening that night, so she had gone to a different campsite with her other friends. I'm not sure what the thinking was. All I know is that not a single person at this party of 150 people saw Maddy. So we can pretty much say for certain at this point, she definitely was not at the campsite anymore. This is also when authorities found out why Maddy's tent was flattened. There was a 17-year-old young man at this party that apparently just jumped on the tent or took it down. He probably thought it was a funny joke. Authorities questioned the heck out of this young man, and he was not found to be, involved at all in Maddy's disappearance. He likely was just being a teenager and thought, hey, there's someone's tent up. Let's play a funny joke and just flatten it. And a lot of people also found it weird because despite there being this party of 150 teenagers and them messing around with her tent, they didn't take the beers out of the cooler. They didn't take any of her expensive dirt bike equipment. Maybe they just didn't see it. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that, but a lot of people kind of take that and run down all kinds of rabbit holes with theories. But now we are going back to Sunday morning, and this is when Maddy's mom finally figures out something is wrong and goes to the lake and calls authorities. Well, while they are there and authorities have shown up, Jordy and her mom show up at the lake as well. They were helping search from what I have gathered, and Jordy ended up finding 2 of Maddy's rings at the opening of the tent, as well as 1 of Maddy's earrings. Now, there's a lot of speculation that's gone into this as well, that maybe she planted them there, but according to Maddy's mom, it was very typical for Maddy to just throw her jewelry wherever. So maybe when Jordy came back earlier, she had pulled them out of the tent while pulling her sleeping bag out, but others believed it's very possible this was a sign that there had been some sort of struggle, that maybe her rings got pulled off or her earring got pulled off, but there was no other sign around the tent at all that suggested there had been any sort of issue with Maddy fighting with anyone. Searches quickly spread out all over the area. Maddy's parents had, like I said, questioned every car that came in and out, and people came in at all times of the day, which made it very, very scary because the first campsite's gonna be one of the first ones, obviously, that you roll up on. And what if someone had come in the middle of the night and saw an opportunity? There were just way too many possibilities when it came to what exactly happened to Maddy. The searches for Maddy were extensive, but also very, very difficult. The area is massive. This lake is huge. The land around it is huge. We're talking British Columbia. It's hilly, there's cliffs, huge trees, you guys, overgrown bush. There's all sorts of trails running in and out of the area. There's roads that have no names that run in and out of the area. And there's also probably hundreds of unaccounted for small buildings and cabins. So apparently this area was built up around the 20s and it was used a lot for trapping and hunting and fishing, and people would just kind of throw up buildings as they're wandering around in the middle of nowhere around this lake, and they don't have addresses. There's no map to these houses. There's no roads to half of these houses. You can't even see them when you're flying a helicopter over. So that made it terrifying because you don't know where they are until you stumble across one, and there's no telling if people might live out in these. It made the search very, very difficult. Search teams were brought in from Vanderhoof, Burns Lake, Prince George, and Fort St. James, so all these different locations, threw in as many people as they possibly could, and their plan was to grid search as far as they could around the lake. It was the only way that they knew for sure they would be able to hit every single area. Hundreds of volunteers showed up, and they were all split off and, paired with someone from a professional search team so they could grid search a lot faster. Helicopters flew from above. They were looking all along the shoreline of Hogsback Lake, as well as neighboring lakes and the different streams that ran in between. They were also looking for, any sign of Maddy possibly on the ground or her clothing in case she had been in some sort of accident or maybe been taken by some sort of animal. Dogs were brought over from the U.S. They apparently were cadaver dogs that were trained to search above water. There were boats that were equipped with all sorts of sonar. There's apparently something called side sonar, so instead of just looking underneath the boat, it scans from the sides down so you get a much better view. There were divers that were brought in as well. The lake itself is only 22 feet deep, which sounds pretty deep, but for a lake, that's actually not that bad. So they were pretty successfully able to search the entire lake, and they just weren't finding anything. Authorities even were able to search private properties around the area. A lot of these places were grid searched, dived, searched with helicopters, everything 2 to 3 times, and nothing was found. And they left absolutely no stone unturned. And finally, by May 30th, after ridiculously extensive searches, authorities said there was absolutely no evidence that anyone left the campsite from Maddy's tent through the trails on foot or ATV. So this led them to believe that Maddy left by car. But with who? And this just led them to 1 million more questions. Authorities and Maddy's family have stated that this area was searched so extensively, they do not believe that Maddy was there. They're pretty confident in saying that they don't believe Maddy's in the water. Other people have apparently gone missing in this area since then and before then, and almost every single one has been found from what I've seen. Despite being difficult terrain, there's just too many people that go to this location for someone to not be found. If she had gone on a nearby trail and gotten hurt, every single trail was hiked. If she had gone off the trail, she only would have made it so far, and those areas were searched as well. Dogs were brought in, so much sonar, hours and hours were spent on the lake itself. There's just no way Maddy was in this area, so the ground search by authorities was called off. But Maddy's family still wanted to make sure they had not missed anything. By the 31st, literally the following day, their own searches began. More volunteers showed up. I mean, the community just rallied around Maddy's family as much as they possibly could. You guys, even talking about this next part, I'm already wanting to cry because I've never, ever seen a community show up for a family like this community showed up for Maddy and her family. People brought their own boats. People brought their own ATVs. People came and searched every single trail all over again. They did their own grid searches. People came by car and drove every single road that went all throughout Hogsback Lake to just make sure there wasn't anything odd. If they saw any odd tracks at all, authorities were called. They came out and they analyzed it. Maddy's family also hired locals who had planes so that they could do their own aerial searches on their own time. And I've seen a map, and I hope I can find it again, of the area that was searched by the community through planes. And it's huge, like absolutely unbelievable the amount of area they were able to cover. A previous employer of Maddy's even showed up with his boat and his own side sonar and did 10 hours of searching on the lake. People were canceling their vacations, you guys. Canceling their summer vacations, their family vacations, to spend that time instead out on the trails looking for Maddy. People from neighboring towns were hiking their own trails as well, coming out on their free time, and if they searched a place that no one had searched yet, they would call up Maddy's family and say, hey, just for some peace of mind, we searched this area, we didn't see anything. By the end of June, every single town in British Columbia had posters of Maddy up, and every single road between Fraser Lake to Isle Pierre, which is literally like a 3.5 hour distance from each other, had been searched. Every single road. Yet there was no sign of Maddy. In the meantime, sent every single item Maddy had with her that night, her tent, sleeping bag, everything off for forensic testing. The only things that were not found in the car or in her tent were her keys or her phone. So it was believed that she had both of these items possibly on her at the time that she disappeared. They also went to Jordy and asked to take her pillow and her sleeping bag, and Jordy ended up telling them that she had actually thrown her pillow in the wash as soon as she got home, so there probably would not be anything on that if there had been anything to begin with. No information that I know of ever came back from Maddy's tent and items that were taken, but Maddy's family has stated that they don't know if this is just because authorities are keeping it to themselves. Authorities said nothing was found on them, but they believe that could just be authorities protecting the integrity of the investigation. But I do know that Jordy ended up being questioned about blood that was found on her sleeping bag. Now, according to Jordy, the last time she had used the sleeping bag was in high school when she went on a school trip to go hiking, and she apparently got bad blisters on this trip, and that explained the blood. I don't know if authorities ever double checked that or not, but I just wanted to throw that information out there because there's a lot of speculation around it. They looked to see if Maddy maybe had any issues with anyone at the party. Because keep in mind, they had already questioned every single person. They had given everyone a polygraph test. And from what I have seen, every single person passed the test. However, polygraph tests are not reliable. And there's a lot of people that are very upset that the entirety of the party was just ruled out because they passed polygraph tests. But there were apparently a few things that did happen that night. She apparently had been turned down by a guy that she was interested in. He said that he just wanted to be friends. I don't know for a fact that this happened at the party. It's just worded like it is, but according to Maddy's mom, Dawn, she was not overly upset about this. It was kind of like, oh, well, okay, now I'll just move on from that. But there was a guy at the party that was interested in Maddy that she was not interested in, and she turned him down that night, and according to people at the party, he got huffy. Those are the exact words that were used. He didn't, become violent or freak out. He didn't create a public display. I guess he was just like a little irritated. This guy in particular was heavily questioned, and Maddy's mom's words, he was put through the ringer, and he was able to be ruled out. So it wasn't like, she turned a guy down and he got mad and one thing led to another and he did something to her. But authorities at this point had pretty much nothing to work with. She hadn't accidentally fallen into the lake. She likely, first of all, would have risen at this point and been found. Plus, they did all of the extensive searches with sonar multiple times and divers multiple times and dogs. They didn't believe she was on the trails. They believed that she somehow left in a car, but they had no idea who on earth she would leave in a car with. And everyone at the party, seemed to not have any idea what happened. However, one thing that I personally think is that Maddy was upset at this party about something, and I really wish someone would speak up about it. Like I stated, she ditched plans to go to this party to have fun. So why on earth did she spend the entire night of this party in her tent, and why did she barely even touch her alcohol? Either, in my opinion, either she had high hopes for something. She went maybe hoping this guy was going to like her. Maybe it affected her more than everyone believed it did. Maybe she got into an argument with someone at the party. That kind of brings Jordy back into scope for me because she hadn't seen Jordy since high school. And, she invites Jordy to this party, or they decide to go together. They're supposed to, spend the night together. And all of a sudden, Jordy ditches her for some guy. I'm sure Jordy was off at the party the whole time. I wonder if maybe Maddy's feelings were hurt because she had, been denied or didn't have a guy to hang out with, and Jordy did. Maybe she was pissed that Jordy was leaving and they got into an argument about it. I just would love to know why, instead of having fun, Maddy was inside of her tent texting her mom. To me, that indicates something at that party was not quite right. Maddy's mom has stated that she does not believe Maddy would have stayed at this campsite alone. Now, we don't know for a fact that she knew she was alone. I've seen multiple times she was under the impression there were other people camping there, and there was other people camping there. There was supposed to be Garrett camping there. Maybe others were supposed to. But if she was in her tent the entire night, maybe she just didn't know people were leaving. I don't know if the last people that asked her to come back with them into town, I don't know if they said she would be alone because everyone had left. But it's made people wonder, including Maddy's mom, if she had someone there with her. If maybe she was planning on meeting someone, they were going to show up after. I find that personally hard to believe because I would find it kind of difficult for someone to, show up in a car, sneak into her tent, and not a single person know about it, including Jordy, because Jordy went in the tent and spoke with her. Also, the last people to speak with her before leaving said that she was pretty much asleep. So that also makes me think she wasn't, waiting for everyone to leave to have someone show up. And this idea that someone else was there with her brought up a man named Fribon. I'm probably pronouncing that right. Bjornsson. He was a 28-year-old. He was a logger, I think a father of 2 as well, and he casually knew Maddy. According to Maddy's mom, there was no romantic relationship. They just knew each other because they were on, I think, the same softball team, and they had been around each other. But rumors were spreading like wildfire around the town that they were seeing each other. And according to these rumors, Bjornsson was not a great guy. He was known to be a piece of work. He was involved in drugs, very sketchy behavior. And the rumors stated that Maddy was taken by drug dealers that Bjornsson owed money to, kind of like punishment for him for not paying back. Because these rumors were so severe all over town, he ended up going in to take a polygraph test to clear his name because he said, look, I'm not dating her. I have nothing to do with her. His mom was upset, saying, he's turning his life around. He wouldn't be involved in anything like this. Maddy's mom was even saying, no, they weren't involved. And sure enough, he ended up passing the polygraph test. So it was believed that he had nothing to do with her disappearance and that she wasn't taken by these, drug dealers to mess with him. But 2 days later, after taking this polygraph, and he was publicly cleared, he went missing. And you can imagine what this did. This just started a whole other round of rumors. And then within 2 weeks of disappearing, his decapitated head was found in a cabin in a neighboring town. Now, this took a lot. A lot of people were like, oh, for sure. Like the second he comes in and is like, oh, I'm not responsible for this. I don't know Maddy like that. I don't owe these people drugs. As soon as he speaks out, all of a sudden he's, basically kidnapped and then murdered. And while it's sketchy timing, I agree. They were able to quickly find 4 individuals that were responsible, and they were able to confidently state that the 2 situations, Maddy's disappearance and what happened to Bjornsson, were entirely unrelated. But that just kind of goes to show you how theories can just start going and they can take over. So what on earth happened to Maddy? Every single person that heard she was missing didn't even believe it because she's just so independent and capable as a human being of taking care of herself and getting herself out of any situation possible that most people were like, oh no, if there's anything wrong, like she'll absolutely get out of it. This is just not the kind of person that anyone assumed anything bad could happen to. Granted, none of us are immune to these things happening. And there are a lot of things out of our control in situations like this, but everyone was just baffled. There's no physical evidence that we know of in this case, at least that authorities have released. Everyone at the party that night has been questioned and ruled out. They've all passed polygraphs, even Jordy, who people have a lot of speculation about. So now I just want to dive into kind of the most believed and circulated theories out there, some of which I'm only talking about because her family wants to make it very clear that they are not valid theories, and they've been very upsetting for the family. So that's what I'm going to start with, actually, is the one that has upset the family, and it's because it was kind of pushed by the media a lot. It's a situation that can easily be sensationalized, and that's probably why the media latched onto it, and that is the fact that Maddy was a victim of the Highway of Tears. Now, I feel like even the second I heard that as a theory, I probably made the ugliest face thinking like, what, why? Like, why would someone think that? And I'm sure a lot of you guys that are familiar with it are having the exact same reaction right now, but this was actually pushed a lot. I'm going to roughly brush you guys up on what exactly the Highway of Tears is. I've mentioned it a few times, but in case you've missed it, it is a roughly 450-mile stretch of Highway 16 that runs between Prince Rupert, BC and Prince George, BC. So it's a very large stretch of highway. There's a string of murders along this highway. The numbers are all over the place. There's I think like 18 confirmed cases by authorities, but numbers go up to like at least like 50 something from people that believe they link cases to the area. All of the murders have been of women and children, and they've all, for the most part, been hitchhiking along the side of Highway 16. Some bodies have been found discarded along Highway 16 or somewhere nearby. Others have not been found yet. They were just last seen hitchhiking on Highway 16. Now, majority of the victims are indigenous, but not all. And a lot of people believe that because of that, plus the fact that Maddy was close, and I use that term very loosely, to Highway 16, that she is part of the victim count for Highway of Tears. She's even labeled as a victim on one of the largest websites used for the Highway of Tears. Now, her family, again, has made a huge point to say that this is not a thing. She is not a part of the Highway of Tears. Authorities have come out, from what I've seen also, and stated that she is not a part of the Highway of Tears. You guys, first of all, she had a car that was working. It had gas, it was running. So there was no reason for her to not use her car if she needed to. Also, it would have been a 3-hour walk to get to Highway 16. And from what we know, these victims are picked up directly off of Highway 16. I doubt Maddy would have walked over 3 hours away to the highway to hitchhike. She would have passed by multiple houses where she could have asked for help and used a phone. She's a people person. She wouldn't have been scared to go walk up to someone's front door and be like, hey, I need some help. I need to call my mom. But I will say that while I was really running that theory over through my head, I started to think about the fact that, okay, well, yeah, she had a car that was working. She wouldn't have needed to hitchhike. She had her keys. She could have gotten into her car. But then I stumbled down another idea. It is believed, again, that the keys and the phone are on Maddy, or were on Maddy when she disappeared. If she left unwillingly from this campsite, if someone came and took her, if she was out on a trail and something happened, she would not have taken her keys with her. Why would she have had her keys with her? They were huge. She had like typical teenager keys or like young adult keys where you've got like this gigantic, thing hanging off of it so you can hold on to it. And then you've got keys from like who even knows what on your keychain. It was a huge bulky keychain. She wouldn't just have that just to have it on her. Plus, she likely would not have been able to keep that in her pocket, so you would think she'd put her keys in her purse, but her purse was in her car. So again, if she would left unwillingly, she would not have taken her keys? If she did leave willingly, why did she take her keys but not take her purse out of the car? Everyone said she didn't go anywhere without her purse. Her money was in her purse, her ID was in her purse. Then I started thinking about, what if she didn't have her keys? What if the keys are not with Maddy and that's just kind of this assumption we're making and not looking otherwise? I believe it's a huge possibility, since I think something odd was happening at the party that night, that someone maybe took her keys. Did someone take her keys as a joke? They thought they'd be funny and they forgot to give them back. Or maybe did someone take them because they were angry with her and didn't want her to have them and maybe wanted her to not be able to leave the campsite? You see what I'm saying? That could kind of lead you down a bunch of different pathways. And it also immediately brought my mind to the tent. There was no sign of foul play, but things in the tent seemed to be thrown around. What if Maddy was looking for her keys? And while I know that kind of seems like something small, I feel like it can open up just a little bit more when it comes to the possibilities of what could have happened and the position she may have ended up in. Now on to probably what has blown up the most all over every Reddit thread, any possible comment section where anyone can say anything about this case, and that is that Jordy is very, very suspicious. Something that bothers me a lot about the Jordy situation. Everyone says it's very strange that she left her friend and, that her story changed about falling in the fire and hurting herself, and that's why she left, and or she was too drunk to stay, which doesn't make sense. Wouldn't you rather just lay in your sleeping bag and sleep than have to get in a car overly intoxicated and drive for 20 minutes? I can tell you right now the option that I would pick. But I personally am not as thrown off by those. I feel like in the scheme of things, she just wanted to leave with her boyfriend, and she had a very guilty conscience for doing so. So I think she just kind of found any possible excuse she could to give to Maddy or to tell authorities to make it seem like she had to leave because she was so hurt, or she was, very, very drunk, couldn't be there, kind of to make herself feel better. I genuinely believe that maybe was just like the start of white lies to cover up the fact that she really just wanted to go and be with her new boyfriend. But like I said, the one thing that bothers me beyond anything is the fact that she claimed to go to check on Maddy that morning. She went out of her way to drive 20 to 30 minutes away with her boyfriend Tyler to check on her, yet she did not contact anyone. Why? And then on top of that, she went that far to grab a pillow and a sleeping bag? If she knew that Maddy would be coming back to her home with all of these items, why wouldn't Jordy have just waited to go and pick these things up from Maddy's house? Do you know what I'm saying? She had to work that day, so it's not like she was missing out on her pillow that day or missing out on the sleeping bag. So again, I find it very odd she went that far that early in the morning to grab these two items, and then immediately went home and threw the pillow in the washing machine. Myself, as well as a lot of other people, are also very thrown off with her interviews. There's again one on 48 Hours. There's an episode, I have that link down below. That was the first interview she did, and then she did another one for an independent documentary a few years later that I also have linked down below. It's on a YouTube channel. And the first episode of 48 Hours that she's interviewed on, I don't know. I really want you guys to go and watch it and tell me what you think. It's the first half of the 48 Hours episodes. It's not very long. She just seems like she's acting like it's a joke. Like she's giggling about certain things that I don't think are very funny, and she's spending a lot of time just kind of defending her own actions. And it was very interesting because, as I always state, I am very into language. The way people say things says a lot more than you'd think. And in this episode, she says, Maddy said she would be safe. And using the word safe is just, as soon as I heard that, I perked up. I'm like, that's a very odd word to say. It's like you're overcompensating or you're trying to push a point. And even the interviewer caught on this and went, wait, what? Did she specifically say she'd be safe? And immediately Jordy changes what she says. She's like, oh no, she said she'd be fine. Oh, she said she'd be fine. And she totally changes things up. Then in her most recent interview, you guys, it's like something caught up to her. Like a guilty conscience or something, because entirely different attitude. She can barely get words out in this interview. She is tripping over her words. This is where she repeats certain, events a couple of times. She's like, oh, we set up the tent, got the wood, we set up the tent. I'm like, you're throwing me through a loop here. She also talks about how bad she feels and how guilty she feels during this interview. So I don't know what to think. And a lot of people think her behavior is just so suspicious. And then according to Maddy's family, they hired a private investigator, and this PI interviewed Jordy as well. And Jordy repeatedly asked for her favorite pillow back. And it's the same pillow she drove 20 minutes to get, the same pillow she immediately threw in the wash. I don't personally know what to make of Jordy. I think it's very possible she just started a few white lies to protect the fact that she felt guilty for leaving Maddy, and maybe it spiraled out of control, and she's trying to catch up now and can't, and she feels terrified about it. I can understand how that could happen. However, I also think she gives off this vibe of just she knows more. There's something more. The vagueness in some of the things she says, like this rowdy crowd, and this is when things changed. I wish I could understand why she said those things and what exactly she meant by them. And I don't know if she understands that when she says things like this, it makes her look more suspicious, and why in turn she won't just come out and say what she means. But that's kind of really what's creating all the speculation around her. And this brings me back to the fact that the partygoers were all ruled out by polygraphs. And a lot of people wonder, Are we sure every person was accounted for? This was a Facebook event. Did people see this and maybe show up? If there's 50 people and according to Jordy, these people showed up and no one knew at the end of the party, how do we know they found all of those people that nobody knew if nobody knew them? Do you get what I'm trying to say? You know, I'm sure maybe a couple of names were thrown out and they maybe got to know each other while these partygoers were there, but how do we know for a fact that authorities found every single person? And then on top of that, that makes me nervous because there's now this group of people that are strangers there at this party. They're there around the time that Jordy is saying she's leaving Maddy alone. Did they overhear this and see this as an opportunity? There's also a theory that maybe a wild animal got to her, but there is absolutely no supporting evidence and this ended up being ruled out. You would expect to see blood. You would expect to see maybe clothing tracks, some type of trail. This would draw in other animals. There would probably be some sort of odor nearby, but there was absolutely nothing like this found. So honestly, who the heck knows, you guys? I don't have any idea. Did someone come to this camp in the middle of the night and just, again, see an opportunity with her being there by herself? Some stranger that's completely not on authorities' radar. It's the middle of nowhere. It's remote. I think it's highly possible that some off-the-wall random person could have shown up in the middle of the night and potentially done something. Maybe they made noise and maybe Maddy, you know, was scared and felt like she wanted to leave. She couldn't find her keys. She's, you know, throwing things around, frantically trying to find them. She doesn't find them, so she unzips her door, gets out, tries to run, and then someone drags her in the car and drives off with her. There's just so many different possibilities here. I don't think there's going to be more physical evidence or anything like that. So hopefully, tips will close this case, I strongly believe. Every year, like I told you in the beginning of this video, there is a poker ride that the family and community kind of put on together. Put it on at Hogsback Lake, and you guys, they went above and beyond. They created trails so that horses had their own way, ATVs had their own way, walkers had their own way. They built bridges to make sure these places were easily accessible and, you know, there weren't any issues along these trails. And it's just a great way for people to come out, be on these trails so they can search, but also remember Maddy. And it just kind of keeps that hope alive. And they always said, you know, hope will bring her home. And that's exactly what this poker ride was about. And I'm absolutely devastated that they are not able to hold that poker ride this year. I have seen the family state on, I believe, the Facebook page and an article that they are still hoping people will go out that day. Obviously not in large numbers and socially distanced, but they still want people to go out on these outdoor trails that day and, you know, remember Maddy and just take a look around. There's also a very, very informative website that I suggest you guys check out, as well as the Facebook page. The website is madisonscott.ca, and it has all the information you could ever need about this case compiled in one spot. It's got a donation button. You can give them money so that they can help create bumper stickers and posters. They also have a timeline. They have photos. They've got all the news media coverage that they can find. They've got all sorts of things on there, you guys. They keep Facebook updates going through there as well. I will say I've not seen a lot of activity on the website since 2018, so I don't know if they just aren't running it as much anymore or what exactly is happening with that, but I definitely suggest going and checking it out. I do know that the Facebook page is very active. There are a lot of posts on there, but I do want to make something very clear as I state that. John Lorden mentioned this because there was a problem like this with the Madison Scott Facebook page. He mentioned this in his video about her, and it's kind of ironic because I've had this issue happen in regards to my channel in the past couple of months as well, and it's very upsetting. When I direct you guys to a Facebook page, it is to show support. It is to follow along with updates. It is highly, highly disrespectful to go to these Facebook pages after watching one of my videos or watching any other true crime YouTubers videos and just point blank directly ask some question that is triggering and upsetting. And that's apparently happened quite a lot on the Madison Scott Facebook page, so they do not want that. They've recently had to repost again. You know, be respectful. If you have questions, that's fine, but they have like a whole Q&A thing, so you make sure you check all your bases before you ask something that can be very highly upsetting. Just be respectful, you guys. Think before you speak. It's not, you know, our business to know every single thing. So with that being said, I just wanted to thank you guys very much for listening to Maddy's story. I hope some answers come to her family. Her family seems so sweet. I highly suggest you guys watch both the 48 Hours episode and the documentary. Again, both are linked down below. The documentary, I personally really like that one because it shows who Maddy was. It dives into her friends and her family, and you just get to see a different side that you don't normally see in things like 48 Hours, which seem very focused on, obviously, forensics and police investigation, which is important, but I just appreciate that the documentary is more about remembering Maddy and getting the basis of the story out. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and go now before I keep on rambling. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to Maddy's story. As always, I have any contact information you need listed down below. If you have any tips, make sure to share the story everywhere you possibly can to help raise exposure. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so we can hopefully bring them home together, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.